Are we on? Are we on? How's it going, guys? BigRia.com. This is the guide to retiring. How to retire early and make $30,000 a month. If you want to stop working, if you want to be able to retire and hit 30 grand consistently a month, this is how to do it, right? How to retire early and make 30 grand a month. We're going to walk you through everything starting right now. Let's get into it. Are we on? Is this on here? Okay. All right. The guide to retire early and make 30 grand a month. BigRia.com. You should go there. It's an amazing site. By the way, a couple of you had pointed out, I wasn't going to shoot this. A little bit late getting this. I've had my eye and my skin issue come up, and when I take it, my face and stuff gets swollen. And I wasn't going to do this, but I was like, you know what? Just do it. Do it now. Do it. Get it done anyway. So I got a couple of emails. I appreciate you guys. None of it was like, oh, it's like looking at Freddy Krueger. It wasn't like that. This is a lot better than it was, but I appreciate that. So that's why we're a little delayed in this video. Okay, anyway. Enough with put away the violins, awesome. All right, Big Ria Guide to Retiring. Go to BigRia.com, by the way. It's an amazing website. It'll change your life. It's amazing. It's spectacular. It's beautiful. Just imagine a picture of me that's like even better than that. How to retire early and make 30 grand a month. How to start from zero and retire, quote unquote. You shouldn't want to retire to do nothing. You should want to be able to have enough money so you can buy back your time. Most people, when they wake up, they do stuff. They have to go and trade their money for time or do something because they don't have enough money to buy back their time. Find out what that amount is. We're going to talk about that today. What you need to do to your replacement level to buy back your time so you can start living your passion and doing your destiny. Go through our destiny diagram class. It's a combination of what you love to do, what you're good at, and what the world needs, right? That's a perfect, that intersection is your destiny. The combination of what you're good at, you can go through the diagram. It explains everything. It's really cool. It's because what you love and what you're good at, there's a combination there. Your passion, and then what you love and what the world needs. Your calling, and then what the world needs and what you're good at, being your gift, or what you love and what you're good at, your gift. Whatever. It's on the diagram. So it's the top is what you love. The bottom left is what you're good at. The right is what the world needs, right? So what you love and what you're good at is your passion. What you love and what the world needs is it's your calling, because you know it's your calling. And then what you're good at and what the world needs is your gift. The combination of those is your destiny. We teach this a lot. We do a lot of great stuff with this. A lot of people do a lot of amazing things. Okay, let's go. So how to start from zero, retire at light speed, right? Spelling. I didn't do that. Did I write that? With a steady income of 30 grand a month coming in. Was that copied and pasted from what I sent? All right, well, how to retire and not say you're going to spell correctly. Actually, that could be correct. Okay, there's never been a time where asset accumulation is easier or more profitable than right now. So here's what you can do about it and what you can do to get started in this right now. So retire with 30 grand a month. How anybody can start from zero and retire at warp speed with a monthly income of 10 to 30 grand a month. Have I said that enough? Do you know what this class is about? Making 30 grand a month. So here is the whole process of retirement. I've done this since I was 17 years old. I was working with people with mortgages and doing kinds of like financial planning stuff. And the one thing that always blew me away, starting to get that itch and stuff. If I start flaking, I don't know what I'm going to do. So the one thing that always blew me away with people is how poor people were with their spending and with their tracking stuff. So what we want to do, if we look at what is retirement basically, if we look at the history after the Great Depression, FDR, the New Deal, all these things came in place. It used to be that only the rich people could afford houses, right? So the whole idea of mortgages, at least the way we look at them now, was started after the Great Depression. You should know the history of this, right? The history of what retirement's supposed to be. This is also when the world's largest insurance program was developed called Social Security. Now we hear about Social Security a lot, like politicians and people like that talk about this, and we're not going to go into like. The one thing we can all agree on is that it's not sustainable, it's not working. The way it's supposed to work, though, is the world's largest insurance program. Basically, somebody who's in their 20s should be able to work for 40 years, and they save a little bit of money at a time, and then the government uses it very responsibly. It's invested, and then you get basically the money that you put in, you get paid out. What this requires, though, if you look at like a population pyramid, it requires a big base or a solid base to pay for this elderly population. If you look at places like China, one of the reasons they're having problems is they've got this huge older population, but because of their own population control, they've got this very narrow base of people, young people that are not paying for the old people. And it's kind of like a Ponzi scheme, right? But Social Security is what it's supposed to be: security that's provided, socially, and it's supposed to help you to avoid this problem that we had with the Great Depression. Because of what happened with the stock market, the government stepped in and said, we're going to put measures in place with the stock market. We're going to make sure it doesn't collapse again and that people don't lose everything. And we also need to make sure, because they did research. I've talked about this in the money class part 1. This is kind of like the money class part 2. But they realized that like 95% of people retire, and when they're of retirement age, they don't have any money left. So what Social Security is supposed to do, and I'm saying this because like the 401k stuff, all the spinoffs of retirement are based on this very simple idea that the reason you're given a Social Security card is so that it's like your bank account, or that's the way it was supposed to be initially, right? So you have this account, you put a bunch of money in this account, and then after decades of investment, you have enough money, you have enough money there that you can live off of. And there's 2 ways to look at this, the money for retirement. One is that it's this giant sum of money and you take out such a little amount that there's just this pile of money left. That's a really terrible way to look at it. Like you've got a bunch of money into your mattress, you live off of it, but there's so much money that you'll die and there'll be enough money left to give your kids, but it's not really invested. What's supposed to happen is that they have what's called the stock market and the blue chip stocks. Like when people say the stock market's up, what they mean is the Dow Jones Industrial Average usually. And that's 30 stocks that are maintained by the editors of the Wall Street Journal. Those stocks represent the American economy. These are very like blue chip stocks, very safe stocks. So you're supposed to take your money every month or every year. They're supposed to invest it in very safe investments that produce a result that a very predictable result that you can count on, and it creates money over time. You get what I'm saying? It's important to understand that is how retirement, the way they see it's supposed to work. You gather a bunch of money over time, it's invested, and then you get a return. So we're going to do basically that same thing, except we're going to do it in an advanced way. The fact is, though, that over the Social Security program is the largest insurance program ever. And over the course of decades that we've been doing it, over half a century now, almost a full century, what are the numbers? And the numbers are still the same. About 95% of people have to rely on work or income or charity or friends and family to survive in their retirement age. It doesn't work. So the question is like, what's the problem? What's happening? We're going to find out the problem today and how you can avoid having the same issues everyone else has. The conclusion with all this stuff is that social mobility is dead. It's like the most important stuff to understand with all the core of all my training, all of our stuff, is that if you want to change your income class, nobody is doing that, right? If you want to, and I go over my essay class, I go over all the numbers, I break this apart. Social mobility does not happen. Look at any study. Harvard actually just came out with a new study with dynastic wealth, what they called. It's what people used to hate, dynasties, like, Princess Charles and Diane, and which that whole dynasty's fallen apart as well in many ways. But dynastic wealth is really the only thing most people that have money today, most people that have money today, it's like a dynastic wealth. Everything is basically dynastic. It's a form of dynasty. Almost everybody who has money today, everyone that is making 30 grand a month passively, they were born in that category. There's not this large population of people or a large segment of people that are having any kind of social mobility. That's really important to understand. Because this is what you're trying to do. You're trying to create income ascension, but almost nobody knows how to do it. But lucky for you, this guy has got it figured out, and we'll help you get there. So we got a few questions about this, and I want to make sure I cover all these. So some of them came in the comments. You can check those out. Some of them came in emails about the Forever Fund. This is like the most important thing we teach. One of the top things of everything you do. You got to be thinking about this. Remember how what we just talked about with FDR, and remember when you were little, you talk about retirement or putting money away for college or whatever. All this stuff you hear when you're growing up, or all this stuff that you hear about money, it's all with the same idea. You save up a little money over a long period of time, and hopefully you have a bunch of money and you can live off of that. The Forever Fund, okay, this is the whole concept of what we teach, is that it's an accumulation of money or assets or equity or whatever you want to call it. Let's just call it money or equity, which is money or assets or whatever, that makes you at least $30,000 a month. So if you're getting an amount of money, there's 3 things to consider. It's the amount of money, where you're investing it, and then the production, what's called the return. It's also called the production, which we're going to talk a lot about today. So at 5%, if you're only making 5% of your money, because remember what the idea about the whole idea behind Social Security is that we have to create safety. So we have to make sure there's not a collapse again in the stock market. Let's create safety, government measures. This is one of the reasons why since COVID, when the government's putting $1 trillion a day in liquidity in the stock market, they're saying no matter what happens, we don't care. We're going to make sure the stock market doesn't collapse. And part of the reason is because of people's retirement, stuff like that. And so you should be able, in America, it's very easy. We look at a baseline of 5%, that's easy to make. 10%, 12% is even pretty easy, but we can count on 5%. So if you want to make 30 grand a month and you're only getting 5% of return, that means you need between $2 million to $6 million to make $100,000 to $300,000 a year. Okay, so the Forever Fund ideally is an amount between $2 million to $6 million. That means you're going to make $100,000 to $300,000 a year passively. You're just going to live off the return. Now, ideally, you should have more than that because you want to take the money you're getting in your return, live off a half of it, and reinvest the other half so it continues to grow. We call it the Forever Fund because it lasts forever. You know, it's going to be dynastic wealth of your own, a dynasty, right? Because your kids and your grandkids can live off of that same amount, and you're not ever touching the initial $6 million. So that's what the Forever Fund is. It's an amount. It's not one investment. It's having $6 million, for example, in your Forever Fund, or having, as we'll talk about, creating money and having equity and assets that amounts that money. So if all it takes, 5% is easy. You can just put it in an index fund or something like that, which we talk about the first part of the money class. I won't get into that now, but getting 5% is easy. So if getting 5% is easy to do, which it is, then why doesn't everyone just go out, get $6 million, make 5%, and live off of $300,000 a year? They'd be in the top 1% of America, in the top 0.001% of the world, and like the 0.00001% of all the people that have lived on Earth. 110 billion people. We're the luckiest ones, the luckiest 5% ever, and we're the luckiest 5% of the luckiest 5% that have ever lived on Earth. Just always gotta have gratitude, right? Okay, so why doesn't everybody just do that? Go get $6 million, earn 5%. Well, it's a $6 million. That's the problem, right? That's what we're going to cover today, okay? I'm going to show you how quickly and how easily, okay, we've got people doing this at warp speed, how you can quickly and easily do this. It's a lot quicker than you think. Okay, so there's 3 takeaways here with the money, with this whole idea of what they did with the money, okay? First, you have the amount, the equity. This is all we're talking about today. You have an amount, you have equity, right? In this case, like $6 million. The second thing you have is you have the investment, where you're putting that money. So in the case of Social Security or your 401k or whatever, they're putting it into a hedge fund or they're putting it into some thing that you have no control over. You probably don't check on or have any idea how it's doing, right? And the return, you're paying all these fees and stuff you don't really track. You should just take a second and look at that, and you probably won't be very impressed or very happy with what happens. But the third thing is the ROI. What is that money producing? Wherever they're investing it, what is the return you're getting every month? This is also called the production of that money. So basically, these are 3 things to take away from what we've talked about so far. We have equity, right? It could be cash. It could be let's just call it cash, money, whatever, as some sort of assets, right? You have assets, that's one thing. You have where it's invested. Is it in the stock market? We'll talk about other places where it should be invested, where it could be invested. And then we have the production. So just keep those 3 things in mind. We have the amount, we have where it's invested, and then we have the production, right? Those are 3 things to keep in mind, because you got to manipulate those 3 things to take control of your finances. And I'm not saying to go and tell your 401k guy everything I'm teaching right now. First of all, there's no risk. It's not going to cost you anything to do this stuff. But also, it doesn't require you to refinance your house, to do any kind of stupid shit that people are doing right now. Because I'm not saying go buy a bunch of Bitcoin. Although, my gosh, when I did say that, what did I say? I said when all the coronavirus shit happened, go back to audio. I said how to be badass about this. I said I'm dumping a bunch of money in that, and people said, well, it's collapsing. Awesome, you don't do that. But now look, I said it. I believe it was 4,800, something like that. Now almost $60,000, man. If you listen to me, imagine the people that did listen to me, how well they did. Okay, but don't do that. Don't get into Bitcoin. Okay. All right, let's keep going. So retiring with 30 grand a month. Okay. Oh, we're getting right to. Okay, so the best way to make money, the best way to make $6 million, $3 million, $2 million, right? Because that's our first thing we got to do. We got to get that equity. We got to get that asset. The best way to make money is to make money. That's not just a clever play on words. This might be the most important sentence I have to share with you today, okay? I've studied, if you go through the success stories I've had, They are the most amazing success. I honestly, of any formal or informal education you'll ever go through, I've been doing this shit forever, man. Since I was like 17, I've always been good at learning how to make money and then helping other people. Even when I was doing cold calling stuff, showing other people how to do it. And I've had success stories, amazing things. People go out and do all kinds of, like, when I say make 10 to 30 grand a month, you should demand, like, where are people that are doing that? Where are people that are starting from zero? And you should have a history of that, Azam. And I've got, ever since I've been doing this, the first students I've ever had that I ever worked with, I remember people, they were struggling. It was when I started like Indianapolis and throughout the Midwest, and then eventually all over America and eventually around the world. The success stories I have and that our team has are the most amazing success stories you'll ever hear. Especially now, it's like ridiculous. I mean, people that are doing some really amazing things. But here's the secret, okay? Here's the second part of that I don't know anyone that ever admits this, okay? And this is when I started working in the intelligence community and I started seeing when I started understanding social mobility. And this is when I first started becoming obsessed with these ideas that, like, most of those people, most of the success stories, if you follow them out 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years later, almost all of them end up back to what they were doing before. Why? Because they didn't do this. They didn't create the equity. They didn't get the ownership. They didn't get business stuff, right? This is why foreigners, as soon as they get to America, what do? As soon as they get to any free market, they immediately buy stuff wherever they were. My aunt did the same thing. She worked at basically like a convenience store in Brooklyn. She worked her ass off. The owner was never going to sell it. And he said, you know what? He would never finance a sale. He said, nobody's going to run this place better than you. You're the only person I've ever met that's going to run it better than me. And he financed a sale to her. She ended up selling it a few years later. Made enough money to get a down payment on a house in Ohio that she still owns. Used some of that money to buy a house in Indiana that she still owns. And again, she understood, like, on a fundamental level, they have the entrepreneurship. They understand you got to own shit. You got to buy stuff. So the best way to make money is to make money, is to go out and create equity. That's the best way to do it. I know that may seem like that's not such a brilliant thing. That sentence changes everything. The reason, this is the difference between people that go out. I've had students go out and make 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 grand in a month, man. Go through my success story. I mean, we've had this. It's not a big deal. And I know people think like making 10, 20, 30 grand or six figures a month is hard. Man, we got people doing this all day long. Ain't no thing. It's easy. Go through my stuff. It's easy to do. I'm not going to get into models today because I go over and talk about how many, all our stuff. If you're new to my stuff, we break down stuff up into models. Like, a model is basically a checklist that creates 10 to 30 grand a month, so that every model should create social mobility and income ascension. It's easy to do. That ain't no thing. But the thing is, how do we maintain that? How do you stay and create that social mobility and it maintains for a generation, which is defined as about 25 years? And this is how you do it. This is what you really, really got to get done. Okay, so the best way to make money is to make money. The reason people struggle is because they don't own or control enough stuff. You don't own enough shit. That's the easiest, most direct answer. We're working a lot with the inner city now. We have a project building 1 million inner city business owners under the age of 21 or something like that. If we can get them to 21 and whatever, I don't know I forgot what it was. It was like if we can get them to 21 and they're either working or they're in school, and if they have kids, they're married, and they haven't been arrested, or at least they aren't, they're doing community service if they have been arrested. If we can get them there, their chance of going to poverty are down like 90%. There's 10% chance they'll ever get into like homelessness or anything like that. So what if we can add business to that, right? Because it just changes everything. So that's one of the things we're adding, and this is some of the problem we have. The reason why they're not making money is because they don't own enough stuff. Here's a secret here. Anytime, if I had like one sentence, I said the best way to make money is to make money, ... This is the second part of that. Anytime you increase the income of an asset, you increase the value. So value equals equity equals ownership and control. This is what we're going to be doing. We got to create income. We got to create equity. And we do that by increasing income. Okay, so what has COVID-19 taught us? What has coronavirus really taught us? There's two Americas at least. There's no denying this now. The people at the top, once it was obvious that they weren't being affected, it was, there's a lot of pictures online about what a testing site looked like in a good area with money and in an area that didn't have money for everybody else. And if you didn't have COVID, when you went to go get tested in any area that wasn't like in the suburbs or in a nice area, you were going to get it by the time you were done with the test. There was no safeties, there was nothing happening, no masks, there weren't social distancing, all that stuff. But you go to the nice areas, you don't even get out of your car. They come up to you in the hazmat suits, like, they're exploring Mars. They don't even come anywhere near you. They've got these, long robotic arms that come in and give you the test, and they give you the results immediately that day. The other place, it gives them weeks. They may not even get the results. And it really makes it clear there's two Americas. Look what's happening. Amazon's profits, this is just from the COVID, from the shutdowns, and from the first roughly the first year. Amazon's profits are up 100%. Walmart's profits are up almost 80%. Target's profits are up about the same amount, 80%. Lowe's profits up about the same amount, 80%, 75, 80%. Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, Google, all the Silicon Valley, all have record highs. Their valuations, they were already going into this, the most valuable companies, and now they've just blown up. But meanwhile, what's happened with small business, any local business, you've experienced this if you've driven around or just looked around. 31% have closed and revenue down, or 50% down. That should be 51%, sorry. 51% are closed or are closing, and the revenue down 50%. So even the ones that are surviving are making about half as much money. They're dying, they're slowly dying. This is a massive wealth transfer that's happening from small to conglomerates. Everything is going to big business. This tells us where we're at in the economy, but more importantly, I covered this in the other class here. This is super important. We are in the middle of the biggest transfer of wealth, and it is very few people, normal people, are able to take advantage of this. Or, when it's an amazing thing. It doesn't matter how you feel politically. The fact is, like Joe Biden, the reason that he was able to win and to get the Senate and be able to have the victories he had, the top reason to getting it, if you don't know, we have a polling company and we do this polling. There were two things, the $15 minimum wage and the $2,000 checks. This was huge, especially in the key areas that he won on. And what did he do? As soon as, I'm not, this again, I know people are really emotional about this. I'm just saying, this is an objective fact. Once he got that, what did he do? What did he do? He immediately turned around and said that, it's like the $2,000 a month is really, it's not really going to be $2,000 a month. It's $15 minimum wage. It's not really, immediately, the people and I'm not saying the $15, I've talked about minimum wage before and how in many cases it's, there shouldn't be any minimum wage. That's not the point. It's not my opinion. My point is that once he got what he needed, and of course, I don't want to, it's not him, they're all like this. But it's an amazing thing that they're nickel and diming the people at the bottom that are whose lives could be changed by $2,000. And they're sitting there, they're doing that while at the same time giving, these corporations everything they want. There's never been, I know people don't want to hear this, but man, if you're not rich, if you're not in that category, you're everybody else. And everything is against you and stacked against you. And there's such little mobility, little chance of mobility, that when you have something like this, like I'm talking about today, you've got to understand where you're at. The fact is that you're a machine. You're made to just feed these big corporations. You're made to just be a small, that little hamster in the wheel. And unless you get out of that, you've got to get out. You've got to find a way to create mobility. We first say, see the opportunity. It's the Empire mission. See the opportunity, build your ladder, then help other people build their ladders. Because no matter what you do politically, socially, wherever you look, we're always seeing that the very people at the very top are taken care of, and everybody else is basically supporting them. And you gotta. I'm not saying that overthrowing the system or anything. I'm saying you've got to be in that. You've got to find a way to create social mobility. This shouldn't be. The more I have to convince you that you need to be rich, I know. My entire life, that was all yeah, absolutely, that's what you got to do. But now, for the first time in my life, this is actually a controversial thing. It's wealth accumulation is, and it's a weird thing. I'm just saying that's one of the reasons I brought up the Biden thing is because we've had these conversations with a lot of people who. There's so little trust in institutions anymore, right? Like the CDC, our whole lives, they were the most trustworthy organization ever. Now nobody trusts them, right? But that same distrust you should have for everything, including the very system we have. Now, we're in a control economy. Let's move on. I went over this in the creating passive income. Uber is the biggest taxi cab company in the world. They own zero cabs. The largest apps and software vendors in the world don't create any apps. One of the largest shipping companies in the world is Amazon. They don't own any trucks or planes. Skype and Zoom are the largest telecom companies. They don't own any phone lines or internet lines. Netflix is the largest theater house in the world, largest movie house in the world. They don't own any theaters. We've talked about this. Google, Alphabet, sometimes the most valuable company in the world, $1 trillion business. What do they make, right? So they don't really sell anything. It's a pretty amazing thing. Apple's the largest cell phone company in the world. They have zero broadband width. What does this tell us? We are in the controlled economy right now. It's never been easier to go out and control assets and to create income extension, social mobility. Ownership is nothing, control is everything. I said that, then John Rockefeller stole it from me. It's never been easier to be more profitable, control assets than right now, historically. You want to have a thriving dermatology business with no physical location. We've talked about how Anna and other people on our team have done some really crazy, brilliant things. You can go through our other stuff on that. To create income and equity isn't just helping a business, but it can be the entire business to create income and equity. And that's what you want to do right now. This is in one sentence what we're doing. We're going to grow our income of these companies and assets. And by doing that, we're creating value. So in one sentence, you'll build and then use your business building skill as leverage to fill all three money buckets. Which you should know that. We'll go over that in a second. You have to master the skill of growing business, right? Of taking a business where it's at and able to grow that business and grow that income. Because when you can grow the income of an asset, you instantly grow the value, and then you can use that value as part of your forever fund and to fill all three of your money buckets. Get the real estate stuff going as your punching bag. The reason I recommend getting into real estate is the transaction side is also a lot of fun, and there's like a lot of LCs. It's really easy. This stuff, everything I teach is super easy unless you're a dickhead. And if you're a dickhead, it's like everything's mission impossible. We always say everything is mission impossible. For the LC, everything is like mission impossible. Doing anything is like this massive amount of work. But getting this stuff going, getting your business skill going. Start with the real estate, and I'm not going to cover models today. We talk about that in every other video. They're really easy to get done. Everything can be done in less than 20 hours a week. Get a model going and start working with companies. Start seeing where you can attach these models and how you can start understand how value, how equity, and how money works. So get your income up and get out of all debt, including your house. We'll talk about this more later. This is the first thing you want to do. The first money bucket, three money buckets, right? So there's money now, transactions, money over time, which comes from residuals, royalties, and dividends, money, basically monthly payments, and then money later, equity and or some liquidation of that equity, right? So these are our three money buckets. These are the money buckets you need to fill. The money now, the money over time, and money later. So money now, money you're getting right now, right? Then money over time, payments, and then money later. It's super important to understand that when you work on something, you want to ideally have one seed that fills all three of these harvests. And we're going to talk about every model I teach does just that. It fills all three of these. But at first, you got to fill the first one. You got to get to 10 to 30 grand a month. Your business should be at 10 to 30 grand a month. And maybe you spend more than 20 hours a week if you're not using my stuff. If you are, there's no way on earth you could possibly spend more than 20 hours a week. But get your business up to 10 to 30 grand a month, right? And now we start to fill that first money bucket. There should be no reason that you cannot survive on 10 to 30 grand a month. I've never met anyone that can't survive on that, right? So the first thing we do is get that first bucket filled up. We pay off all of our debt, including your house. The numbers, I've went over this in the first part of the money class. What happens when you pay off your house, the likelihood of you having wealth and dynastic wealth and social mobility, it's super important. So pay off your house, get out of all debt. The only example of if you have, this is something we started teaching. I'm not saying I was a snob or an elitist, but my whole life, I only want to talk to people with money. Only recently do I start talking to people like in the special needs programs with parents and stuff like that. And when I started sitting down with a lot of these parents with special needs, thank God, man, I don't have any, I'm so lucky and so thankful. I never have, I don't have these challenges that some of these people have. Real crazy shit going on, really horrific circumstances with their kids, and they also have money problems on top of that. This is one of the reasons why we came up with this, saying, look, it's not that hard to go out and start building a business and making money. This is the exact process we teach. This is not complicated. I'm condensing like 5 days into like this one class. It's not complicated. I really apologize if it seems like if I'm going too fast or if it seems like it's not clear, because we teach kids how to do this. I mean, this is not difficult. Then we change stuff like money now, money over time, money later. We used to 3 money buckets, really simple, easy to understand. How do we grow any business? We use scripts, a checklist, and drawings. We don't call them the F word charts. Then we call them Wendy charts. Now we just call them drawings. So it's really easy to understand. I'm saying all my stuff's super easy to understand. It's really easy to grasp. The idea here is that you got to pay off all your debt. The example, though, that one case, if you have huge hospital debt or huge medical bills, which some people do, especially in the special needs group, okay, you can leave some of that, talk to the hospital, talk to people, negotiate something, and that's a whole nother, I'm not going to get into that right now, although that does apply to a lot of people in our groups. But let's leave that out. I'm assuming you don't have like $3 million in medical debt, which a lot of people do on incomes of like 40, 50 grand a month. It's just like, it's not going to happen, right? It might as well be 3 billion. You're not going to pay it. It's like the national debt, right? So that we'll leave that out. But for everything else, money now, we got to get that to 10 to 30 grand a month, pay off all of your loan, all of your debt, including your house. Then we fill up money over time. We need to start working on your payments. We do these payments by getting residuals, royalties, and dividends. I talked about this in the passive income class. Residuals means like you do work and you get paid over time residually. Like it's for the same amount of work, but you're getting paid over an extended period of time. This is the technical difference between residuals and royalties. Royalties is if there's something new that's done. So like if you record a song and you put it in a movie, you get paid every time they play that movie or every time that song, every time that clip is played. But if you get royalties, that means every time they put that song into a new movie, anytime they create anything new. So when we talk about the MFM models, or other types of models with companies, it's important to understand the difference. Residuals might be you put a marketing campaign in place, you're getting paid from that same work. Royalties is if they take that same campaign and end up growing another business or doing it with introducing another model. But this is how we can get our money over time up to 10, 20, 30 grand a month pretty easily too. So you want to get residuals, royalties, and dividends. Dividends is the returns that you're getting on your equity, which is the third one, money later. Equity or some liquidation of that equity, meaning you sell it or you refinance or something like that. We're going to talk more about this, but let's get into each one. Money now. Get it to 10 to 30 grand a month. Get out of all debt, including your house. It's the most important thing you can do is get out of all debt, credit cards, everything. Get out of that debt. Come up with a schedule. If you and I were sitting down together right now, I'd sit down with you and your spouse, everyone in your house. We'd all talk about what's all your money. We'd come up with your income blueprint. What do we need to do to establish floor income? Ask any student I work with, anybody that's trained by my stuff, they'll tell you the first thing we talk about, aside from like establishing wins and big highs and things like that, is what's your policy set right now? Based on what is our business producing right now predictably? It's not important how many deals you did or how much money you've made or how much equity you have in real estate. I'm going to get to that in a second. Most of that's BS. What's more important is how much predictable money do you have? And now what can we do to make sure that we start subtracting yourself from it so we turn it into residuals, royalties, and dividends, right? Once we get that first money bucket full, really quickly you're going to see that you don't want the cash anymore, because once you pay off your house, once you get out of debt, what would you do with 30 grand a month? And the only thing you're going to do is pay a lot of taxes on it, just a shitload of taxes on it, which you don't want to do. So you want to convert that money, start giving it away, and start turning into these money over time, money later things. But we got to establish the floor income. What that means is, let's say your cost, we have the foundation, fence, and fortress. The foundation is the 10 to 30 grand a month. That's the base we got to get to. Our fence is when we do this multiple times. We have multiple models running. We create income immunity. We have multiple policy sets and multiple teams running these different models, like different oil wells, right? And it grows with autonomy. And the fortress is when you've actually built people on your team. It's like we talk about this, hiring someone to do something, hire someone to do it, and then hire someone to do it. And that first hurdle to do something is like the LC is like, oh my God, right? But once you do that, once you hire someone, now your business grows on its own. And then you have a fortress. We have income immunity with all of your income and financial fearlessness, all these things we've talked about before. But basically the main thing is get to your 10 to 30 grand a month, get the model going, get out of all debt and clean your house, and then establish your floor income. So here is my floor. If I do nothing, if right now, this is the question, if you did nothing at all, how much money comes in every month for the next 30 years, 40 years, 50 years? It's probably not a great answer, right? This is what we want to establish in the money now. Get an idea. Let's get what is our base that we need. We need 5 grand a month, 10 grand a month, whatever it is for our expenses, and to make sure that we start paying off our accelerated debt reduction. This is when we get to like Velocity Bank and other things like that I'm not going to talk about right now, but if you have questions on any of this stuff, by the way, as you know, we respond to every comment. We respond to every email. We'll get back to you. We'll answer every question you have. So any questions on stuff, just ask me, please, and I'll answer. But that way we have our floor income. So we know if I don't do anything else, I know that I'm making X amount every month. This is all my students that are trained with my stuff. This one of the things I didn't focus on as much. I did this with everyone, but I didn't focus on the equity as much. And this is one of the reasons why over 5, 10, 15 years, a lot of times people, I want to see you succeed. It's why it's so important you listen to what we're going to talk about in a second. This is not hard to do. Getting 10 to 30 grand a month ain't no thing. Getting this stuff done, super, super simple. If you're hungry, again, if you're a dickhead, this is, oh my God, it doesn't work in my area. Awesome. Money over time. Okay, this starts with the floor and we only move up. So once we establish our floor policies and our floor income, think of it like a house with multiple levels. We just keep raising the floor. We keep raising the floor and raising the ceiling, raising the roof, right? We just keep rolling up more and more and more. So we have our floor policy. Let's say we're making 5 grand a month. Let's just double that. Let's just, take out all the numbers and just double the numbers. So now we have 10 grand a month, 15 grand a month, and our floor keeps rising. Now we create income immunity and multiple oil wells. Like I said, this is where we create our fence. And at the end of the stage, you don't want to have money. You want to turn the money off, and you want residuals and or equity. So again, once you get to your 30, 50, 60 grand a month, what are you going to do with that money? And you might say, well, I'm going to go on vacation, do this stuff. That stuff really, somebody asked me this earlier about like buying Ferraris and stuff like that. It's actually quite awkward. Years ago, when I was into that stuff too, man. But if you have anything like, if you have kids, you have any kind of like semblance of a normal life, as soon as you start, sporting a Ferrari, everyone's asking your kids, how much money does your dad make? How much money does your mom make? And just like really awkward conversations. Plus, if you know people, it's like a lot of them are like, get laid off or they're in foreclosure. Like, these stories like kids in the soccer team and you show up in this $300,000 Ferrari. It's like, quite awkward actually. But that's a good problem to have, all right? What you want to be at the end of this stage is that you've got your $30,000 a month, you've got your 50 grand a month or whatever, and now you don't want to pay taxes on it. All your stuff is taken care of. So now you're going to convert that, and you're going to convert it into equity. You want to eventually, at the beginning, we're focused on the money now. Where we get towards the end of the 90-day period, or the 6-month period, or however long it takes you, is you're focused entirely on the money bucket 3. Right? You just want equity. You don't want any money now. You don't want any dividends or you don't want any residuals because you're just going to have to pay taxes on it. You just want all equity and you just do deals. Look at the richest people in the world. That's how they do deals. That's how Tom Cruise does his deals for Mission Impossible. And if you can't trust Tom Cruise, I mean, come on. That's how Kevin Spacey does it. If you can't Kevin Spacey, come on. If you can't trust his judgment. Money bucket 3. He had a great line we used for a while. He said, everyone who's enjoyed getting success it's incumbent on you. It's a responsibility to send the elevator down for the next person. I thought it's such a great line, right? We had that line up, but so many people, got honest about it. So we had to take it down. And I was thinking we should leave it up and just not put him, just attribute to somebody else. So we put Kaiser Soze from, The Usual Suspects, but everyone knew who that was. And it's such a brilliant line. If we're going to use it, I think we should give him credit. I don't want to use it and not give him credit because people do that with my shit all the time. It's where you see, taking my stuff and using it, and I don't care. It doesn't matter. They're all LCs. Okay, money bucket 3. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, right? Because this is where all of our stuff. Remember the Forever Fund I talked about like 7.5 hours ago, right? What happened to that? We first got to figure out your cash now, right? We got you 10 to 30 grand a month now. Then we get your money over time. Work on dividends, residuals, and royalties. Get that where we want it to be, wherever number your income immunity is going to be at. Figure out massage our numbers to where they are, where you want them to be. Then we convert everything and just put everything into money bucket 3, right? Because money bucket 3 is going to last you. This is where you're creating your dynasty. This is where you're creating all your wealth. This is the problem, my goodness, for those students that I've worked with before in the past. The biggest reason why, if you were rich, you didn't stay rich, it's because of this. And it was a problem. In 2007, I did a conference call. And I actually did a video. This is before video was what it is today. Some of you may remember that. We've had some very good friends of mine. Pretty much everybody on my team started as a student. And there was a young lady we worked with, and we said, we're going to do the lender agent model. And we're going to buy Apple stock. This is when the Apple iPhone first came out. She loved Apple. And we bought Apple stock and a few other tech stocks. And that business, the lender agent model was making about 20 grand a month. And we just bought 20 grand a month of stock pretty much every month. And that continued just with signs up until 2017. The amount of money, if you're on that call, is insane. It's well over the Forever Fund here that you would need at 5%. Because basically, you can do the math on this. It's $20,000 invested, and you got back $80,000 every month for 10 years. Okay, imagine how much money you end up with. And that was all done with signs. Now, that's fucking bullshit. Awesome. I don't know. I get it. The stuff we talk about is so insane. It's so crazy. It's like unbelievable. It's why I went over the top at the time when I was more interested in this to like really document these success stories, because I said, man, nobody's going to believe this shit. It's so crazy. But it's like, and that was back in the day. Imagine the shit we do now. But this was a problem I didn't focus on with everybody, because you got to do this, okay? So whatever influence I have with you, you've got to do this, man. You've got to do this, all right? If you have any questions about this money bucket 3, let me know, because if you watch this stuff, if you go through our stuff, I kind of feel bad that, because when I started making money, my uncle, who never liked me, as you know, all he'd ever call me was like, "You fucking cocksucker, I fucking hate you." Like, that's like what he would call all of us. I don't mean that's what he would say when he was mad. That's just like what he would call us sometimes. Like, it was, not one of like, not bedside manner, right? But he told me one thing. It's one of the only nice things he ever said to me. He said, you know what? He's like, I don't know why anyone's believing you and why you're making money and why anyone's giving you money and why a business, why anyone listens to you. You didn't go to school. You're not a doctor. You're not an engineer. You're not a surgeon. Basically, you're a giant piece of shit. I'm like, oh, this is great. I should be taking notes, right? But he said one thing. He said, you gotta pay off your house. And it was the dream house that I bought. I talked about this. It was, man, it was fate. It was destiny, man. Because since when my uncle came to America, they had him read a book. One of the first books he wrote was The Great Gatsby. And so all the time, we'd always be like, my life, Old Sport, has got to be like this, a 45-degree angle. Got to be like this, always moving up. So all childhood, he'd always say, my life, Old Sport. And we'd all have to say it with him. My life, Old Sport, has got to be like this. And he'd be like, that's right. In America, your life always has to be like this. Every time we want a house or anything, I remember this is what it was like living with him. I remember the first, we got this, there was a house and they were building houses in Geist. This giant house. It had this gold staircase. It was beautiful, giant house. I took a picture of it. I had it up on my wall and my uncle saw it. He's like, oh, is that the house Ozzy wants? And I was like, yeah, it's the house I want. He's like, no, that's not the house Ozzy wants. You spend too much time in the bathroom. You spend too much time eating. You sit around too much. You hang out with your friends too much. You want to play too much. You want to watch TV too much. You don't want a house like that. You want to sit around and be a lazy fucking cocksucker all day. And I was, seriously, I was 7 years old at the time. And that's how it was, like, all the time. If you want these things, you got to get out and get them. My life, Old Sport, it's got to be like this, always going up. And it's a green light. The whole movie, Great Gatsby, is a green light. I'm telling this long story. I just got cut away with it. When I looked at that house that was being built, it was across the street from my junior high. And I was looking at it. I knew it was going to be a big, beautiful house. It had balconies and everything. And I went there. And there was only one day that they had a truck there. And guess what color the light was? It was a green light. I knew it was fate. It was destiny. If you know the whole story, how I ended up getting that house. But my uncle told me you got to pay that house off, and I paid that house off. And right after, that's when my house got raided, and all kinds of craziness happened. And that's why I had to make $25,000 a month when my house got raided. But anyway, my point being that he understood this, and he taught it to me, and I did it, and I did not do as good of a job as I should have. I was also like quite young, but this is why the reason why once you get up to $50,000 a month, which is easy breezy, go through my stuff, it's fucking brilliant, man. It's amazing. Like all the stuff, it's like all the stuff we train with and stuff we do. It'll change your life. You'll be able to change other people's lives. But you got to do this, okay? If I focused on this enough, if I made this a big enough deal, I want to give you a giant hug and have it like long and awkward and say, please just listen to me on this one thing. You got to get the money bucket 3 because there's so many forces working against you. Like I was saying earlier, the moment you start fixing your credit, do you know what happens? People start coming after you for your credit because like, oh, this person wants to fix your credit. Let's go after them. We had a company. One of the things we used to do, and I hate to say this, like I used to do really shady stuff when I did the Wall Street stuff. And we used to have companies. We had a debt collection company, and we would go after people for medical debt that they weren't even responsible for. But we'd send them this scary letter. The companies send them this scary letter from lawyers, and you must pay this. And all that's the kind of stuff that people do to like. It's like if you're not in the 1%, that's the kind of crazy shit that they do against you. This is how you get out of the 1%, okay? You got to focus on the equity. There's 2 things you always focus on when we talk about that equity. It's liquid, how easily and quickly you can convert it to cash, and productivity, how productive it is. How much ROI is it producing by itself if you have that equity in the business, okay? So let's talk about how we create equity and what we do with it. So what about real estate equity and the productivity? So 1% houses are rare at $150,000. So the idea is if you go buy real estate, you get a bunch of equity. Well, you should buy real estate zero down. You shouldn't be putting loans into it. But you should look into the numbers. I went over this. The number of people, like 90%, 91% of people that make money in real estate are actual home buyers. They're not real estate investors. And of the money that's made in real estate, 90% of it goes to homeowners, not to real estate investors. And of the real estate investors that get into business, 90% of them, 95% of them fail. It tells us 2 things. Almost everyone who makes money in real estate isn't even trying, and almost everyone who tries to make money in real estate fails. And if we look at how productive is equity in real estate, if you have a $100,000 house and it rents for 1%, for the first 5 to 10 years, 7 years, you're only getting about half that income. So it's producing about 0.5% every month. That's still about 6% a year. But over time, as your debt comes down, as you get better with your management, that production gets better. So of that 1% rent, the $1,000 a month, you get more and more of it. So over 10, 20, 30 years, eventually you'll be getting about 1% on that $100,000 house, which is about 10 to 12%, which is twice the amount I was talking about with the 5% of the Forever Fund. So that sounds pretty good. This is why most REITs, real estate investment trusts, are about 10 to 12%. However, that takes a long time to do, and it requires that you buy a bunch of houses. The other thing is that 1% houses, a 2% house is going to be about $30,000 to maybe $60,000, $70,000, or not. It's going to be $30,000 to $40,000, $20,000 to $40,000. You're not going to get a 2% house. And by that, I mean it rents for 2%, right? So if it's a $40,000 house, it rents for $800 a month. That's 2%. You can find 3% houses at places like Mars Hill in Indianapolis, and like, I don't even talk about those because basically it's a meth lab, and to collect rent, you're going to need, to call the SEAL team and, the SWAT team, and you're going to need a tank to get rent every month. And the people are like master manipulators, like masters of disguise. They're, you think you're talking to somebody, they've stolen 10 identities. It's like DMX, the rapper. He went into the hospital, and he had a warrant out for his arrest, so he gave the name of his friend, but his friend had a warrant out for his arrest too, so they arrested him. It's crazy, but it's like the person you're talking to is stole the identity from someone who stole the identity from somebody else. We've had all kinds of situations like that happen, but the 2% houses are going to be in like the best areas as far as like low income areas, usually that $30,000 to $40,000 range, $20,000 to $40,000 range. A lot of people hear that, like, how can you buy a house for $40,000? Look at Indianapolis State Fairgrounds. That's where we do a lot of our deals, the 2% houses. 1% houses, okay? This is more likely to happen. But you're only going to get 1% houses around $150,000, right? So what if a $200,000 house does not rent for $2,000 a month? Usually, a $300,000 house doesn't rent for $3,000 a month. A $500,000 house doesn't rent for $5,000 a month, right? It's not 1%. So the higher up we go, the less production we have on that equity, even if the house is paid off entirely, right? This is because you're buying for area, prestige, and appreciation, other things that come into play. Basically, look at cash flow and appreciation as inverse. The less appreciation you have. So a 2% house has almost no appreciation. So if you look at like the State Fairgrounds, those houses are selling for $30,000 and they rent for $600, but there's like zero appreciation, right? The houses that are selling for $600,000 and rent for $3,000, those have usually much more appreciation. But as soon as you talk about debt service, basically the only people that make money in real estate are people who have unrelated income, so they can absorb the cost of ownership. I've had students, again, go through my stuff. Every living organism only learns from mistakes, but the ones that survive learn from the mistakes of others. Learn from mistakes of other people. I've had students who've gone out and owned hundreds of houses at once. Think about how insanely qualified what I'm about to say is. I've walked students through having jobs as like waiters and waitresses to owning hundreds of houses at once. I don't mean they did hundreds of deals. Hundreds of properties at one time. Hundreds of doors. Apartment complexes. All this kind of stuff. And eventually, on a long enough timeline, because they don't have the support system I'm talking about in place, usually they'll just, they won't stay in that, they won't create income ascension and stay there for the long term. So over time, a higher net 10 to 12% can happen, but it takes cost absorption. That's the term they use, cost absorption. And the only people that can do that are people in high income. This is a very long-winded way of saying real estate is not going to have very high production on the equity. And it's like that, what do we say, it's like the I don't fuck with you. There's a chart we use to tell like whether you should do it or not. Don't go with the real estate with the productivity. If you're going to do that, man, you're not going to like what happens. All right, so where do we get our equity? Where do we get our production, right? What do we make happen? A local business may not be very liquid or productive. To fix this, we can build companies to suit and convert our equity. To convert our equity, we have many choices. Basically, here's what we're doing. We're growing companies, local companies. So first, get your 10 to 30 grand a month. Get your residuals, royalties, your dividends in place. And now to create our equity, this is the simplest, easiest way. If you want to create $6 million in equity, if you go out and do it in real estate and you do it with second mortgages, which is basically what you're going to do, if you're buying on terms, you're never going to have a first position, almost never. Even if the house is paid off, you're paying the seller. If any of this stuff you don't understand what I'm saying, you can ask about it. You can go check out our other classes. But the seller is going to be the first because they're financing the property, right? So you have a second. Seconds are not very productive. When we talk about productive, it's how much ROI is a second making you. It's usually not very productive. And it's definitely not liquid and stable because the first thing to go anytime there's any problem is a second. You can get 90% off on a second mortgage. So it's not a safe place to put our money for our $6 million to go. So where do we come up with our $6 million? Like I said, if we go out and buy a bunch of real estate, it's going to take a long time and it's not very productive. But if we start working with companies, we can start filling up our 6 million really quick. If you ask the average person, you go to even an expert real estate person, you say, how do I come up with $6 million in my forever fund that's earning me 5%? How do I do that? They're not going to have any clue, especially if you want to do it zero down with no loans, no credit checks, without leaving your house. Hello, McFly, hello. Not going to happen. With business, we can do it. And that's the huge secret. That's what we want to do. We want to start working with companies and become business owners. And we use our skill with business growing to do this. So then we can convert our equity. Number one, let's say we grow a business by remember how businesses are valued. There's two things we need to know. It's what are they making, and then what's the multiplier for that industry? What are investors paying? So if we grow a business by $10,000 a month, right? That's $120,000. That may be worth $120,000 if the multiplier is 1 and 1. It may be worth $300,000. It may be worth $500,000. But what we've done is we've grown the value of that business. So you could take a local business that's, let's say, a $2, $3, $4, $5 million business, easily grow it. There's something we talk about, the day 38 principle. Basically, you take a penny, you double it every day, and the sum of the penny doubled every day. When it's compounded, if I take 1 penny, day 1, 2 pennies, 4 pennies, 8 pennies, 16, 32, 64, right? $1.28. You keep going out, $2.56, $5.12, $10.24, right? You keep going out. By day 25, you're at like $5,000. By day 31, you're at $10 million. By day 38, you're over $1 billion. By compounding, right? We've talked about this before in our compounding class. It's the same thing with the physics of a domino, right? Dominoes can knock over a domino 50% bigger than itself. So if you start out with a 2-inch domino, it gets out a 2-inch domino could take out a domino that's 3 inches. A 3-inch domino could take out a domino 4.5 inches, right? And then if you do that math, it comes out like domino 17 can take down the Empire State Building. Domino 30 takes down satellites, I think, and then domino 57 takes down the moon, and then domino, I think 76 takes out the moon, the sun, our entire solar system. I mean, if a domino was that big. But if you were stood next to a skyscraper and you took one tiny domino, a 2-inch domino, and you knocked it over to try to knock over that skyscraper, it looked pretty silly. But that same input, that same effort could knock down that skyscraper. You just need larger accumulation. So when you start your business out, right, you're at that 2 inches and you've got to grow and do a whole bunch of stuff. But wouldn't it be cool if you could go right to the end, go right to that day 38, go right to that domino 57, right, and knock over that one domino? So instead of doubling your business where it is right now, what if you went and double the business that's at 3 million or 5 million? Or you grew it by 20, 30% and you get half of that, or you get 20 or 30% of that growth. You immediately create equity. You get what I'm saying? So this is where all kind of examples we've used in other classes about how you can go to a company, especially like surgery centers. We're going to talk more about how to find high growth areas that people are buying in right now, like diabetes centers, sleep centers. It's been for years, it's been hot. And these have huge multipliers. So if you grow that business by $100,000, that $100,000 may be worth $500,000 or $1 million, right? Because it's in the right business. But then when we can convert, I think we'll talk about this in a second, because that's assuming we work with the business and actually grow that business. But what if we grow our real estate business and apply that income and merge it with the business? Because what we're doing is we're getting our 10 to 30 grand a month ourselves, right? Then once we create our 30 grand a month, we're looking for ways to leverage this and turn it into equity. And we can do this with local companies to start with, and then bigger and bigger companies. But pick that local company, that's that 2-inch domino. Because pick a dentist down the street. How much is that business worth? Maybe 1 million, 2 million, 500,000, whatever. If you grow that business by $100,000, $200,000, now you've created some equity. Even if you don't get any of the equity, you understand how this equity game works. The best way to make money is to make money. By increasing the income, you're increasing the value. Even if you don't get any of it, just do it as a GXM to start with. At least you're getting that skill set down. This is what our heroes are doing every day now. And then we can start getting ownership. We can start getting control of that equity. You get what I'm saying? But again, there's two things you have to look at. How productive is it? How liquid is it? We'll talk about that moving. So once we have this 100,000, 200,000, right, we can use it as a down payment to acquire the business zero down. So let's say you want to buy a surgery center or a veterinary clinic or one of the many companies we talked about in examples in the past. We good? Yeah. So one of the ways we can do this is we grow that business. Let's say we have to come up with $200,000 down. If you go to the SBA or something, they're going to want, X amount of money down. They call it skin in the game. Well, you can create that skin in the game, right? Is this thing working? I keep seeing it kept falling. Okay. Excuse me. You can create that skin in the game by adding this equity. You get what I'm saying? So we can use that. We have like $100,000, $200,000 in equity. We can use that as leverage to buy that business zero down. Number two, we can assign it to a group that wants to acquire for a set amount. We can assign it just like a lease option or just like an offer. So let's say this is assuming we've got $100,000, $200,000 in equity in that business. We could take that $200,000, $300,000, $500,000, and we can assign it to a group that wants to buy that company. So we can assign it for, if you have $300,000, you can assign it for $100,000, $50,000, an amount that's kind of a discount. The group comes in and they have your position. Usually it's going to be a second, and they can do what you're doing. Use that as a down payment to buy the business. Third, we can use it as a means to get shares in a bigger acquiring company. This is one of our favorite things. Buy into businesses that where bigger companies are buying them. Grow that company. Now you have a stake in that business, a 10, 20, 30% stake in that business, or you have $100, $200, $300, $500,000 in that business. You use that as leverage to get shares in the much bigger company that comes in and buys that company. You do this all zero down, and you've basically created this giant equity spread. So what about creating equity and then converting it? So let's say we have $20,000 from the lender agent model, 20 grand a month coming in. What is that really worth? Initially, it's worth a lot to you because you're making 20 grand a month, right? Now, if we take that amount, we can attach it to a business to get part of the growth. What does that say? Yeah, I know. You had that. Okay, so we had one slide. Are we still recording? Okay, we had one slide that I didn't see it because that was the whole point, was that we were talking about the real estate and the equity, and this is where we say, okay, where you want to get your equity is to get the business. That's where you want to start getting into. Start with local companies, create your equity in local companies, right? So this is an example. You grow a local business, and then you're creating equity, you're creating value, and then you're getting a piece of that equity. It doesn't matter what the arrangement is. First, just grow the companies for free at first. When you build your fan base, your 77s, everyone in that market, anyone that's actually in that business, they're all going to know what you're doing. They're all going to see the great work that you're doing and the fact that you're able to grow these companies easily. And they're going to beg you to be a part of these, be a part of their group and help them grow. That's when we're going to grow that actual business. What about if you don't touch that business? Let's say I want to buy a dentist office down the street, or I want to have shares in it. I go out, I build my lender agent model, right? I get my 10 to 20, 30 grand a month, or my MFM, or whatever other model that we're using. I build that income, right? Because that's the secret here, is that I'm able to create income from nothing. I'm able to create something from nothing, right? This just adjusted it myself. Oh, I don't need you to do it. So I create something from nothing. I got my 20 grand a month. How much is that worth, right? This is the question. So you can attach it to a business and get part of the growth. So let's say I've got 20 grand a month and I apply a part of it to a dentist office, for example. How much is that worth? If that dentist office, imagine you're going to buy a dentist office, right? Or a chiropractor or a surgery center, whatever. And you're looking at the financials, and you see all of a sudden you're making 10, 15 grand a month on the side here because you've got a license agreement, or you've got some arrangement, or you've got shares in this real estate business. That's very interesting. What does that do to the business, the value of that business? What we do, I don't think we're going to talk about this today, is we go out and we actually find the buyers for these businesses, because one of the first things you want to do is you want to not only create the value, but you also want to provide the liquidation. You want to go out and find the buyers. Always look for buyers of business. Do you want to buy companies? A lot of people want to buy companies. They've got a lot of resources to do that. And one of the things you can say, especially as people get to know you, is you could say, listen, I'm going to put the lender agent model in place. I'm going to attach it to the business. And if there's a problem with the cash, just let me know, and I can adjust that. And then they say, well, if you're in on it, then I want to be in on the company too. It's a very easy way to create $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 flips in real estate. It's pretty difficult to do. With the businesses, it's easy to do all day long, and you can do it by attaching. Let's say I've got the 20 grand. You understand what I'm saying, right? I've got 20 grand a month coming in here. I go to a dentist, oral surgery place. I say, listen, I'm going to give you guys part of this. You can show it, and it's going to grow your income, and it's going to grow the value of your business. And the most important thing, the most profitable thing for any business, is to have unrelated income. You get what I'm saying? So a dentist office, to show that they've got an extra 20 grand a month coming in from real estate. Imagine if your real estate business had an extra 20 grand a month coming in from a dentist office. How much more would that make your real estate business worth, right? So it creates higher equity. Let's say we go to a very high value business like a pharmacy place or a medical field, where they may have a multiplier of 3 or 4 or 5 or 10. Remember, the two things that value a company is, I know I'm rushing, but I want to make sure I get this done. We have the income, the earnings, and the multiplier. Very high growth companies, like the multipliers and like the .com companies back in the day, was like several hundred times, right? So if it's a high demand area, that multiplier may be 10, 15, 20 times. Your multiplier won't be that much usually, because it's a real estate thing. But there is a multiplier because you're creating this separate value. Somebody that goes and buys a dentist office is getting a real estate business basically for free. Now, so that's one thing. You can attach it to a business and get part of the growth. You can trade it for more liquid assets or create more productive equity at will and use that as leverage. So we can go out. It's the same thing we talk about with the business, because if you own, let's say 30%, if you have, let's say, a dentist office and you've grown that business by 400,000, you got half that growth, you got $200,000. What does that really mean, right? Because remember, we look at how productive is it and how productive and how liquid is it, right? And it's not very liquid. How would you get that 200 grand? Well, you'd have to sell the business or sell your shares, but who are you going to sell it to? Right? For the average person, you don't have many options there. And it's not very productive. You're not making, let's say I work with a dentist office and you put marketing in place. We've talked many deals, easy deals to do where you get, let's say 3, 4, 5, 10 grand a month from a dentist place by sending them clients and helping them grow their business. You're getting 5 grand a month. That's on the transactions. That's the money bucket one. What about that $200,000 that you've got in that business? How productive is that? And that productive, it's not probably making 5%. You're probably not making, if you've got $200,000, or if you've got, it's probably not making, $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 a year. It's probably not making anything. It's just equity you've got as safety, right? But again, if equity is not productive and it's not liquid, it's not really equity, right? If you have no way of getting that $200,000, which in this case you really don't, and it's not producing anything, what is it really? And that's why at first it's super important you just get these deals going, you see how it works. But after that, you start thinking about the next step. What's going to happen with that business? Is it going to be bought? Is it going to be sold? Is it going to be refinanced? Do you want to buy that business? Because if you buy that business, then you get immediate production out of that 200 grand because you can use it as leverage for that down payment. You get what I'm saying? Or you can use it as to show that you've already got shares and you're basically doing like a refinance on that business. If another company's buying it, you can use that as leverage, like we said, to assign it to that other company. Or if you've got 500,000 in, let's say, a chiropractic business, it may not be very productive. It may not be very liquid unless you go out and you find a buyer. You find what we talk about, the executive buyers. We go out and find buyers and bring them in. And now all of a sudden we can create, it's much more liquid. It's much more productive. You get what I'm saying? This is a quick way. It's easy to go out and grow a business and create $500,000 in equity. You could do that, in a month if you're slow. We have, heroes doing that all the time. And when we start thinking about, remember, what you need is $6 million. It's like, wow, I could really go out and do this at warp speed. You can go out and do this pretty quickly. And by the way, if you do this correctly and follow the steps I'm talking about, you're making sure it's productive, that you're getting your 5% or you're getting wherever you need to be so that your money bucket 3 is producing 30 grand a month. Make sense? Okay, you could trade it for more liquid assets to create more productive equity at will as leverage. Like I think we just covered that. You can also write an offer or option on a business, increase the value, and assign it fast. So another way is, let's say we do this a lot with business brokers. Does this all make sense? Okay, if there's right. Well, I'm trying to go as fast as I can through this. Okay, basically, let's say over 3 minutes. If there's any questions, let me know. Do you guys? Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you. If you have, let's say you have a business for sale for $3 million. You write an option on that business for $3 million to buy it for $3 million. You work with them, you grow that business. This is going to require that they're not able to sell and that you talk to them and you work with them. You have first right to refusal. You grow that business and now it's $3.5 million or $4 million business, which may be just one client, right? There's so many ways to grow companies. We talked about this with the money doublers. You go to the average business and ask them, what's a list of people that would double your business, right? You ask them that and you'll find, this chair is beautiful. You ask them who are people, make a list of 5 people that would double your business. They'll make a list of those people. And you ask them, what are you doing to get in touch with those people? There's never anybody doing anything to get in touch with them. So there's all kinds of easy ways to double, triple, redouble companies really quickly. And if you did, let's say you took that $3 million business to $4 million, right? If you had that option at $3 million, you have an option to buy a $4 million business at $3 million. You could take that option, you could exercise it. You can use that $1 million in equity in your option as a down payment. You can also assign that to another company to come in and buy that business because you've got $1 million spread there. It's just like writing an option on a house. There are some things to keep in mind as far as time and lengthiness. This is why it's so important that you have people. You have your compliance curve going. You have your Nobody Mountain built so you can absorb people into that world because nobody's going to come in and buy a business that's $4 million. They're going to say, well, how long has it been worth $4 million? Well, only a couple of weeks or a couple of months. because of this one guy, it means the core business is not doing that well. It's just you and what you did. And that's why they want to make sure they'll say, look, we want to keep you around. We'll include dividends, royalties. We'll include some sort of payment to you or some ownership in this new company so that if there is a dip into value, we'll make sure we include you. These are some of the best and easiest deals you can do because now you're getting your 20, 30 grand a month and the business is worth 4 million. You own, let's say, $500,000 or $1 million in that business. And although that $1 million might not be that productive, like that $1 million itself is not making you that much money. Well, I guess it depends how you look at it because you're getting the dividends, they're paying you a stipend or they're paying you a residual or a retainer to make sure that if there is a problem, you come in and grow the business. Because if you're going to buy a business for $4 million and a guy took it from $3 million to $4 million, you want to keep that guy on speed dial, right? And this is how you can make sure that you get you get what I'm saying? You create like $1 million out of nothing and you get a percentage of that company. Okay. In that case, the option itself also has an equity value and can be used as leverage. Like I just said, you can assign it, you can use it as a down payment because if you have the option to buy a $4 million business at $3 million, one of the examples we used before was a $3 million business that raised up to $6 million. And it was the same exact same process. You can use that as leverage to buy the company because if you know you can double it, this is all comes down to you growing that business and the options, the opportunities you have when you're growing that company. Okay, 5 steps to go get this going right now. Use the models to get to 10, 30 grand a month. Get out of debt. Set your floor. Once you do that, you don't want the money. So first, once you get your bucket 1, fill in bucket 2, and then so on. Fill in bucket 3. All your money goes to bucket number 3. Number 3, next, hunt for equity plays. Highly liquid, highly productive. So it's what you were asking me earlier about. The first thing, once we get these up, we want to start looking for local companies. What companies do you want to buy locally? Start thinking in terms of what are companies that, first, stable companies, consumer staples, companies that they're very stable, very safe, local companies. There's 3 places you're looking at: local companies, international companies, and in between. And look at what are people buying right now? What businesses are people buying right now? Get in touch with us. We could give you an example of a bunch of companies right now that are high growth companies that you want to get involved with. You can either grow that business or you can grow your real estate business and attach your real estate business to that company. Equity risks. Basically, when you start building your equity, there's 3 places of risk. First is a stable, like the blue chip, like the stock market, right where you should be. The second is I don't know about this, or like I don't know if I should be investing in this. And the third is, you nuck and futz, right? That's the category where our companies right now with the catching sunlight, breastfeeding to plants. We have a business right now. We had something called the Legacy Project. Basically, people who are their bodies are shutting down through things like ALS and stuff like that. We have the process where we come in, record videos that you can leave for your family, your loved ones. You can record these videos, and they can watch these videos and get to learn more about you. It's okay. The whole idea here is that you're creating equity by working with companies, right? We grow these companies, we increase value, and then we get a percentage of that business, right? So 5 steps to get this going right now. Once get your 10 to 30 grand a month, use our models, get out of debt, all debt, and set your floor policies. Once you do that, once you've got your money bucket 1 filled and your bucket 2, you don't want the money and income. Fill your bucket 2 with your residuals, royalties, and dividends, right? How many residuals, royalties, and dividends are you getting right now? That tells you how on track you are. Once we're on track with that, we want to put everything into bucket number 3. Just don't get any money now. You don't need anything right now. Once you've got all your expenses, everything taken care of with residuals, royalties, dividends, you're not getting any money now basically because you don't want that. You want it all to be and money bucket number 2. And then money bucket number 3. Next, hunt for equity. Start looking for local businesses that you want to help grow them as a GXM, help them create value, start seeing the value you're doing. Realize that if you put a model in place for a business, we do deals like this all the time. The equity risks, first is stable. Start with very stable companies that you know are solid. That if you want to get in touch with us, we give you a list of companies to start working with. And then these are also, you want to keep in mind, start local, look international. Who's buying internationally, and then in between, who's buying smaller companies like private equity firms, what kind of companies they buying, what are they looking for? Start talking with them, get kind of an idea. It's like wholesaling. People talk about like wholesaling real estate. Find out from the wholesaler what they want. Same thing with companies, the people that are actively buying companies. Find out what they want. Build a business that suits them. That's in line with what they want. There's 3 buckets of risk. 1 is the stable. Really quickly, you're going to get to your 10, 30, 40, 50 grand a month really easily with stable companies. These are all over the place. Very easy to do. Then the I don't know about this. And then the you nuck and futz. That's a good category. That's where almost eventually, first invest with stable companies. Second, go to the, I don't know about this, they're not so stable, not so safe. The third is where you want to be all your time. Eventually, how you know you're successful and how you know that you're really being an ultra high achiever is you're focused on bucket 3, equity, and you're focused on crazy nutty deals like this. How do all the deals we're doing with the working on, I mean, we do all kinds of crazy stuff, working on the breastfeeding plants to, we're ending world hunger by growing plants 10 times faster by catching sunlight and breastfeeding it to plants. That business doesn't make any money. We have the largest teleportation business using subatomic particles and teleporting them in New Delhi, also in Karachi, going like in space, actually teleportation. China did this successfully. That business isn't making any money. This is what we're doing though. This is how we're getting our equity and our ownership in these deals. We go in these companies. We don't have the scientific knowledge. How are you or me ever going to get involved with deals like this? How are we going to create incubators or economic development committee or community or councils, different names for it? How are you going to get in there when you don't have the credentials, you don't have the background, you don't have the contacts? It's your business building skill. That will open the door to all these places. You can actually, we have a Project Legacy. This is something really sad. A lot of people their bodies are shutting down through ALS and other degenerative diseases, basically, that are breaking down your body. If you don't know what happens with that, basically your body shuts down and you start to lose less and less control of your whole body. And eventually you lose control of your vocal cords. You don't talk. You lose control of your lungs. You're just laying there. There's 2 things to keep in mind with ALS and other diseases like that. It doesn't affect your mind. Number 1. Number 2, it doesn't change your lifespan. Imagine that. So if you're 20, 30, for the rest of your life, you're going to be there unable to move from the neck down, maybe even from the eyes down, not able to blink. You have to have, someone else, you're going to have to be, blinking is going to have to be done for you, but you're totally there mentally. Can you imagine that, being a prisoner in your own body? So we have a Project Legacy we started, which was where we'd sit down and record these videos for people. So you could record videos for your daughter. She's like 5 years old. You record video for her wedding, right? You record a bunch of videos, and then we give them to the family after you're gone. Or after everyone says when I get to that point, unplug me, but that's a really tough decision. It's a whole bunch of craziness. But I thought, what can we do to help these people? There's not much that we have right now, but one thing we can do is this Project Legacy. We can start recording your ideas. And somebody made a comment to me where they said, would there be a way that they could talk back? And I thought, you know what? Why can't you create like we end up looking into it. It's called transhumanism, like making a digital clone of yourself. So we have a company in Germany that we worked with that did this. One of our heroes went to this company. How are you and me going to get involved with a transhumanism company? Do you have that kind of skill with AI and programming and cloud computing and all the crazy shit it takes to do that? No, right? I'm assuming not, right? But we said, you know what? Let's put a model in place. We're going to do a JV. We're going to connect. 2, we're going to look at your software and see, who would be a good person that could benefit from this. It ended up being an EMR company, electronic medical records. It was the equivalent of that in Europe. We connected 2 companies. It was a JV. We ended up making the heroes making about $2 or $3 grand a month. The rest of that money they put back in that business. What just happened? We put a JV together for this business. What did we do? We converted that into equity, into ownership, and now we're part owners of this. We have I believe the world's largest, definitely in Europe, the largest transhumanism company, basically, where we create digital clones. And because of that, we were looking for who's buying these kinds of companies. There's one company out of UAE that opened office in Morocco, and they are writing an offer that they want. We have to do something. It's probably going to take several years to do, but they want to write an offer for about $150 million to buy that business if we fit this certain criteria. It's like a private equity firm, basically. They want to buy this. They're into companies like this. That's not important. My point is that I really want to work on transhumanism. It's an amazing thing. Right now we have an experiment. It's like we sit down, we ask you like 200, 300 questions, 500 questions. We put this little thing on your computer and on your cell phone. And eventually we make this what's called a digital footprint of you, which, is that thing ringing on me? I don't know what the fuck that was. It was like you got it? Okay, thank you. It creates this digital clone of you. And so right now we have this process where we're having to see if you could create a digital clone of yourself. And then it's weird because it doesn't have a face and it doesn't talk, but you can chat with it. We're at that point now where you can chat with this digital clone of you, and it tells you what it did today. Like I watched Netflix, if that's what you do, like a dickhead, or I did whatever, And we're going to see if that thing can go out and get a job. And it's really cool, man. So like that's the kind of crazy shit we're working on. How are you or me? Like I want to be involved. The most important thing to do is have thought control how you feel. could be in that place. We've been talking a lot about this, about the icebergs. The icebergs, for 150 years, they didn't know how they were going against the flow of the ocean because they're the deep current. We only found this out after about 150 years with deep sea exploration around the 1970s, that icebergs are tapped into deep current. And the deep current down beneath the surface of the ocean is like 100 times stronger than the surface at the top, because at the top it's like the g-force of several hundred pounds or however they measure that. There's no way anything could go against the wave of the current, but yet these giant icebergs that take days to swim around or to for us to sail around, they're going against the grain. How is that possible? Because they're connected to a deep current. And when I saw that, when I read that, I thought, man, isn't that exactly how so many people are? The most driven of us, the ultra high achievers, they're going against the current, and ain't nothing at the top makes a difference, man, because they're connected to the deep current. They're connected to the universe. They're in the place they need to be with their destiny. That's where you need to be. The shit like that for me is this stuff like transhumanism, man, creating digital clones. I love that stuff. How are you going to get into companies like that? And now the company makes no money, and it's likely that offer that we have on the table probably won't happen. Again, I don't care. I just want to be around that company. Maybe we'll come up with something else as a result of this. The whole idea of doing the digital cloning, that came as a spinoff of our main activity of saying, imagine if you sat down, if you know that, I mean, God forbid something like this happens to you, but if in 6 months you're not going to be around, right? What if we could create a digital clone of you so your wife, your kids can chat with you after you're gone, man? We are saving the fucking planet, man. All right, dissect. So first, those are the 3 equity risks. Work on the first stable companies, then I don't know about this in the pro, you not good futs. It's interesting. I sat down, I said, we do hero narration. It's a whole class we did on that. And it's interesting, like when we describe objectively, if I were to tell you what the people on our team do, it's actually like I'm describing a superhero, right? Like it's just amazing stuff, man. I'm so grateful and so thankful for these opportunities to be around these people and all kinds of heroes. The heroes is such an accurate term, man. So then we want to dissect the liquidity and the productivity of that equity. Is that equity that we're making? So the equity in the transhumanism company, the equity we have is, I don't know, maybe 100 grand, 200 grand. Is it really production? No, it's not making anything. Is it liquid? No, there's no way for us to get it out right now. But that's okay because it's an investment that we look at. But now if I put it into one of the stable places, I need to know that production, that equity is producing for me. How much is it making me every month? Should be at least 10, 12, 15, 20% that I'm investing in this local business, right? I want to make sure my production is there and I want to make sure it's liquid. I can sell it quickly. All right, now you get into billionaire thinking. Think of the future of X, whatever industry. This is what ultra high achievers do. The biggest difference between ultra high achievers and normal people, aside from passion and aside from constantly reading, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Warren Buffett were all asked what they would do with an hour a day. They all said the same thing: read an extra hour a day. People still, I don't know if I should read. I don't know if I need to pay for a mentor. I don't know if I need to get trained. The best advice is free. Just get online. Yeah, the most expensive advice is free advice. All right, what sectors, industries are evolving? What's happening? What's the world going to look like in 5 or 10 years? What changes do you want to see in the world? What if you were... If everything went perfectly, the change that you, like if you were to say that, and I want to create X amount of change in 5 or 10 years, how do you want the world to be different because of your work? Start looking at different sectors, industries. Do you want to look at transportation, healthcare? Do you want to look at teleportation? Do you want to look at transhumanism? What do you want to look at? What industries, what sectors do you want to be in? And start looking at how you can start picking up companies in that sector, in that area. It's really easy to do. I promise you, it's easy to do. And although the transhumanism company, or like the companies with how many... Holy shit, I just realized this. We have the largest real estate company in Asia that has a teleportation business. We also have the largest transhumanism company. There's so many hooks there that I've got that we haven't even been using. We've got, these are all like the crazy stuff that we're doing. These companies aren't making money. Most of them aren't making money, but they're the largest human genome sequencing company. CRISPR, you take the human DNA, put it in a Word document. We could take out pieces we don't like. This is happening today where we can just take out 5 or 6 genes. You end up expanding human life. We end up doubling human life. We're building the world's first. We're building a world where the average human has a lifespan of 200 or 300 years. Whatever the hook is that we use on that page. This is how I come up with that stuff. This is how we train heroes to come up with these hooks. We have another one. We're building the first no animals ever made for meat ever to end all. You can take a single piece of DNA from a chicken and make 10 billion chicken McNuggets. Right? You can do that. without ever, we can have meat that's actually meat without ever having harming any animals. There's other spin-offs of that we want to look at too, but there's all kinds of great, brilliant stuff. What sectors, industries are evolving and not evolving? What impact do you really want to have? Start thinking about this in terms of what the changes you want to have, the impact you want to have, and don't just look at it as just like equity or businesses, but look at it as differences you can make. Get your 10 to 30 grand a month, get the equity in local companies, start picking up bigger companies, and then eventually this is where you want to be. Billionaire thinking. You have no concern for money. The only things you do are things you love. You might not like me. I mean, it's hard to believe that somebody doesn't fall in love with me, right? But the one thing you'll never doubt is that I know what I'm talking about, number one. But number two, that I'm really into this stuff. I actually am into this, and I want to see great things happen for you. Converting income to equity. Hi there. Is this the email? Is this okay? Wow. Okay. So some of you have asked how we're buying our special needs houses. We have a house coming up. It's the biggest house we're going to have. It's going to be like the closest thing to the Professor X house. It's a mini mansion that we're in the middle of buying. How are we doing these? How are we buying some of these houses? This is one of the ways we do it. We put a model in place, like the lender agent model, and now I have a successful mortgage business. How do we convert income to equity, right? Hi there. I have a successful mortgage business that produces over 50 grand a month. This is the lender agent model. I was thinking about trading my business for your house, right? So what kind of house are we going for? A really nice house, right? If that's something that'll work for you, that might work for you, please let me know and we can talk about it. Thanks so much. It's the same email we send to realtors. We say, hey, take a picture of it. Can you send this to your client and get a verbal offer? Can we do a 3-way call with them? We don't want to work out. We tell the agent, look, we'll let you represent us as the buyer. No problem. And this is, we have 2 deals like this going right now that look pretty attractive. But basically, look, I've got my mortgage business, my lender agent model that's making 30, 40, whatever grand a month, right? But I don't have any equity there, right? Because it's not really worth anything. I need to convert it to equity. What do? I'm going to convert it over to a house and start building up that equity. You get what I'm saying? This is how we convert income to equity. Does that make sense? If there's anything that doesn't make sense, let me know. What's the difference? Lewis Terman, study IQ. Okay. Again, all my stuff now is focused on how lucky I am. I'm so grateful. And most people think, the most common thing people say about me, I know it's weird to say, but it's like they always talk about how brilliant I am. This is something really important. Lewis Terman was a guy who believed that IQ meant everything. I've talked about this study many, many, many times. He studied kids that in the 1920s, hundreds of thousands of kids with the highest IQs, insanely high IQs, awesome male level type IQs, right? Like 140, 150. My IQs were never in that range, by the way. And they followed him over life, and he found out, you know what? It doesn't matter how smart you are. You know what matters? Where you were born, your parents. You stay in that plateau. There's no mobility, even with the geniuses. Doesn't matter where your IQ is. You're not going to create social mobility. What matters is where you were born. The people in those neighborhoods, in those houses, were born in those neighborhoods, in those houses. Nobody creates mobility. This is why it's so important that you master this skill so you can see the opportunity, build a ladder for yourself, and then help others do the same thing. Holy shit. Do I love you guys? How great am I to you? No, thanks. Okay. So now, there's 2 things we look at with the equity. Create liquidity. Okay. Let's say I own $500,000 in a barbershop or something, one of our heroes that we used the example, he had $30 a month coming in from his barbershop. That was like, it's, not so great. He's like, but he started to understand the idea that, look, even if I have a record, even if I have all these things, because, it's that idea is like, how am I going to go buy a business that won't hire me because of my record? Well, you can if you understand how to grow the business. So he was getting $30 a month from this barbershop, but he thought, you know what? The fact that I understand that my equity in that business might be, $1,000 or $2,000. That's like the most amount of money he's ever seen. What if I apply that to do the exact same thing, but do it with real estate? Took that $30 a month to $5,000 a month by doing the lender agent model. The lender agent model is not the end all, but by going through that process, you'll understand how to screen providers, how to screen consumers, and put the people together. But if you own, let's say, $200,000 in a barbershop, it's not very liquid, right? How would you get that $200,000 out? You're not going to get it out. In any business, if you don't have, again, the equity has to be liquid and productive. If it's not liquid, here's 3 quick ways to fix that liquidity. Number 1, be the buyer. Use that liquidity. Use that $200,000, $300,000 as a buyer, right? Because liquidity ultimately means that there's a buyer. There's someone that wants to pay for that amount, right? So you can be the buyer. If you want to buy a business, go create the amount of income, create enough income to create enough increase in the value where your cut is enough to justify the down payment so you can get in 0 down. You can work with the owner as well. So you can be the buyer, and immediately you've converted that equity into, now it's leverage. So if it's $500,000 in a barbershop, you use that as a down payment. I'm assuming it's got to be a real successful barbershop, right? Now you've found liquid, you found utility or usefulness of that equity, right? You get what I'm saying? The second thing is create the buyer. So this is something we do a lot. You can merge that business with another business. And a lot of people don't think about this. A lot of companies, when we talk about crowdfunding, our heroes go out and they screen businesses all day long. And this is how we start to buy companies, sell companies, trade companies. One of the questions we ask companies all the time is, have you thought about merging with another company? Is there another company with the economies of scale you could instantly double your company just by absorbing another company? Or what would be another company like that you'd want to look at? People never think about this, but you can take that $500,000 in equity, use it as leverage for a merger. We've done a lot of these deals, but more of these deals we've done with the Signs and the last one. A Signs is another way of take that equity you have, assign it to a bigger company, assign it to another buyer, assign it to use it as leverage to get shares in the other companies we talked about. Executives. So we used to have a program years ago I used to teach. It's one of the first things I taught, where I teach executives, people have made $150,000, $200,000. I would sit down with them and I'd show them how to buy a business. Right, you go out and buy a business, use your 401k money. These are like yuppies, the typical like hi Ted, the country clubbers. And I'd say, look, do you want to keep working at your job? That's okay, but you want to buy a business, because if you buy a business that's that's netting a certain range, where it's the earnings, the EBITDA, is where you want it to be, and the certain range, you make your money back in 2 years if you put all your 401k, if you put the down payment in. And there's enormous market for this, right? So we used to do like a $25,000 training, and people would go out and buy. Everyone that did it would be able to buy a business, because you don't need any skill. They're not going to grow the business. Who's going to grow the business? We would. We'd help them grow that business. And that's what we would do, is we would groom buyers for our company. So we'd work with the company, we'd grow the business, and then we'd go out and find a buyer, a fresh buyer that was not a buyer before. So this is another way. First, be the buyer. Second, create the buyer. Third is find the buyer. To find buyers of companies, this is really simple to do. You can go to the earnings page we use from the business building class. Find out what different multipliers are for different industries. You can look up SIC codes, SIC codes, Standard Industrial Classification codes, and you can find out what classification codes are for different industries and what the multiplier is for those industries, what people are paying for right now. And you can also find out buyers. So I want to know who locally is buying businesses like that. There's not going to be that many people usually, but then who internationally is buying companies like that. Find out that criteria, talk to those people. And then in between, these would be private equity firms, venture capital people, and other business brokers, business lenders, and get a good sense of what they want. Because you talk to the average business broker or business lender, ask them who's having a hard time trying to refinance or get their money. These are perfect people to go in and create equity. So 3 ways to create liquidity. Don't ever let anyone tell you that, I've got this $300,000 in this computer repair store, but it's a bunch of bullshit. And no, you can always create liquidity. Number 1, be the buyer. Number 2, create the buyer. Number 3, find the buyer. And if none of those work, what the hell were you thinking? Why'd you work that business anyway? Don't be a dickhead. It's rule number 1. It's like when Dwight hears, don't be an idiot. It's the greatest advice I ever heard, Michael. Okay, so that's liquidity. We never have an excuse for our equity being, it's not liquid, because people will say to me, well, Azim, if I go and buy $500,000 of Apple stock, that's liquid. That's true, because there's a market. But if I go out and buy $500,000 of a local business, that's not very liquid. I'd say number 1, that equity that we built while we were creating our income. We were filling our money bucket 1, money bucket 2. So you want to build it. You get what I'm saying? Like, you want to build it in places. It's not like you're just picking a random company. Build it in companies and industries that you care about, that you've done your research on. You know that they're growing. You know it's liquid. You know that there's buyers that you can be. You want to be the buyer. Never do a deal. Never assign a deal as a wholesaler or anybody that you wouldn't do yourself. You do that, it'll change your life. I've had people tell me, like, once I thought about that, it changed every deal I did. So don't do a deal where you're not ready to be the buyer. Don't do a business where you're not ready to be the buyer. Don't do a deal where you're not able to create a buyer. Where if you went out and found an executive that want to buy this business, I'm talking about, these are all small businesses that we're talking about. And don't do a deal where you can't find a buyer, right? And if you get in that situation, then the business is really in trouble and you want to talk to them and they really need your help. That's liquidity. Does that make sense? There's no chance at all that you're going to have $500,000 or $1 million. We can go out, we can create it really quickly, grow on businesses really quickly, and we can make sure it's liquid, right? Liquid. Now the second part, to create production. How do we, let's say I've got $500,000 in this, whatever business, and it's not making any money. Maybe I'm making 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 grand a month from a medical group, but that's for my transactions, right? But I have $1 million in that business. Let's say it's worth 10 million and I have $1 million stake. That $1 million is not very productive. I'm not getting a return on that, right? What do I do to fix that? Here are 5 ways to fix that. Number 1, use preferred shares. This is a quick way. This is kind of an awkward conversation. You should have this when you get better at this, we can talk more about this. One of the things we do is we go back to the company and we say, listen, if you're a preferred stockholder, preferred shareholder, you get paid ahead of everyone else. And that's what should happen. You just start getting paid out of the growth. So you become an expense just like anything else, and you get your money ahead of time. This is not a way, people get kind of irritated with that. So you want to make sure that you've had that conversation. They can get irritated if you don't position this correctly. So have that conversation ahead of time. That's one way to do it. Second way to do it, so one of our favorite ways, probably the favorite way here, is to segment the company. So if we say, okay, look, there's parts of the company that are growing the business, parts that are not growing the business. Let's just make a list of each. And you're doing that because you want to do it with them. And there's no way to argue that the parts that are being run, especially if you don't have voting rights in that business, and they're doing, if his wife's like, oh, I want to start an interior design business, and you're in there for medical surgery, and now you're paying for that, you don't want to be doing that. So let's segment the business. And that way, the parts that are going the business, that's what you own 50% of. So we do this a lot of times with medical groups. We say, look, we'll have two businesses. One will be the growing the business, and two will be the actual servicing or whatever of the business. So the part that's growing the business, I own 50%, 70% of that or whatever. And then you own 100%, 90% of the other, or all of it, right? 100% would be all of it. And then you've segmented the company. So part of it is the part that's making money, or the part of it that you own a bigger share of, right? A way to do this is with a model. So we do a lot of, like if we say we're going to build the manufacturer franchise model or an LMM, right? So we go to a group that has the business is over here. Let's open a second division over here, and that division you're going to own 80% of or 50% of, right? So if you want to work with all of our models, we work a lot of times with groups like groups and charities, like our special needs groups, right? So we build a separate division. We'll build a real estate division or a medical division, and that division just goes out and buys companies in that division, right? And then different people can own different percentages of those divisions based on what they're doing. Does that make sense? I've talked about this before, just segment the company. Number 3, combine or trade for preferred position. If you don't like the way that the production is right now, just combine it or trade it for an equity position that you would like more, especially in another company. 3, finance a sale or transaction in whole or part. So take that production that you have and say, you know what, why don't you guys just buy me out? Then you could turn that into getting money from that $200,000, or sell that to another company that wants to own 20 or 30% of that business, right? And now you're not just making it more productive necessarily because you are selling it, you are liquidating it, but so it is kind of the liquidity thing, but it is creating income now out of that. The third part, allow the main company to buy back their shares. This is another way of creating that same income, that same money. Okay, so we talked about creating liquidity, creating production, business growth. 3 ways to grow in any business, all we're ever doing. The only 3 ways to grow a business: more transactions, more profit per transaction, transactions, or different transactions. So in summary, you need to own, control more shit. You need to make 300 grand a month. You need $2 to $6 million at 5%. To get that $2 to $6 million is actually pretty easy. When you start with money bucket 1, they go to money bucket 2, and then throw everything down on money bucket 3. And to get to our $5, $10 million, don't do it through real estate. Do it with businesses. It's really easy. You want equity. Own, control assets, and create income and value at will and on demand. When you create income, you create value, you create equity, right? Focus on the first risk group. The first one's stable, get your stable. That's the first risk group. Then go to the second one, and then eventually go to your passion. Just let your passion lead you. Do all kinds of crazy shit. Swing for the fences every time, because all your stuff's protected. You can actually live and think like a billionaire, an ultra high achiever. The highest equity is relationship equity. Remember that. Build your compliance curve, all these assets. Focus on the fan base formula. All we're ever doing, the whole thing you're doing here is you're making friends, keeping in touch with your friends, and helping your friends. That's all you're doing. Empire mission. See the opportunities, build your ladder, and help others with their ladder to create income ascension. Everybody is building a dream. If you don't build yours, somebody will hire you to build theirs. I love you guys so much. I know I rushed a little bit at the end because this is taking fucking forever. A long time. These guys waited so long. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it. You guys, I love you. Thank you so much. BigRia.com. If you have any questions over anything I talked about, it's like a 4 or 5 day thing, and I condensed it. I have no idea. I've never done this before, but this is the formula for exactly what we do. If you pay me $500,000, this is what we do. We sit down with you. We just come up with the actual details for you. This is how you go out and you create equity, get your Forever Fund set up, make this happen. I love you. Thank you so much. This is good? Good. Thanks. Sorry. Thank you guys. You guys are great. I love you guys. Thanks. Take care. We'll talk soon. Thanks.